Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Matthew Joseph, and this is my first YouTube video. I've been wanting to start this channel for quite some time now. Been going through a lot of changes in my life, but I know right now it's kind of a big topic within our society. Children who are victims of parents who are narcissists, particularly boomer narcissists. And throughout my life, I feel like I've had experience with a few different types of narcissists. There's, parents who are narcissists, and, I've been in relationships with women I believe are also narcissists, or at least have characteristics similar to that of a narcissist. But my main focus today and majority of this channel is going to be on, narcissist parents. I'm not really sure where to begin here, so I'm just going to shoot it from the hip with what's been on my mind lately. I've underwent a great change in my life because of the fact that I've been dealing with a narcissist parent, and it wasn't really something that I figured out or learned until this past year, but just a few months ago, really. I'd gone through most of my life. My parents were separated. I moved with my dad when I was 8 years old. I didn't have any contact with my dad. I wasn't allowed to see my dad. He wasn't allowed to see me until I was 2 years old. It was my grandmother who would come to visit, take pictures, and take him back to my dad and whatnot. And came to find out it was because, of a battle that my mom and my dad were having. My mom just didn't want anything to do with my dad, and that's something that I didn't understand for a long time, again, until recently. But moved with my dad when I was 8, and things just kind of got turned upside down in my life. Things were really bad at my mom's house, so my dad kind of knew that he didn't have to really do too much for me to have things better off, and he put most of the parenting responsibilities on my grandparents, who we lived with at the time. But my dad was in a band, which was mainly just a cover band at the time. They had a hit song back in the 60s, which made him be stuck in those boomer years of his life, and kind of just like constantly living in those glory years. But sorry, I'm at a park and I just want to make sure my dogs are okay. Sorry about that. I just had to take care of my dogs. But yeah, as I was saying, I was mostly raised by my grandparents. I lived at the same house with my grandparents. My dad and my uncles lived there pretty much their whole lives. My grandpa owned the house. He had his own business. He was a World War II veteran. Both my grandparents went to church. We had Bible studies at our house once or twice a week, regularly. They were very involved with the church. I was also brought up in a Christian church. A lot of singing, worship, and going over the word and whatnot. It became a big part of my life. My dad and my uncles, not so much. They never attended church. My dad went to Catholic church very rarely, early on in my life, or not at all until actually I was about 12, when my grandpa got sick. Then my dad started going to Catholic church just for an hour. Wasn't involved with it much. He just kind of went to go, and it's like he's clearly not a very spiritual person. I feel like that's something about the narcissist, is they're just completely incapable of having any type of introspection or awareness, or any gratitude or appreciation for the beauty on this earth, God's creation. But so I grew up in that household, back and forth between my parents. But that house with my grandparents was like a solid foundation for me. It was the only thing constant in my life, and the only thing that wasn't just complete just negativity. Basically, there was love in that household. mainly from my grandparents, so I was grateful for that. But my dad and my uncles, they continued, you know, their focus with this band that they were in together, that they'd been in since they were young. And as I said, they had a hit record called "Meet Me at the Corner." When back in the '60s, it was like a local hit. They were signed to Warner Brothers, but you know, the fame was mostly just like localized, and that's kind of something that went to their heads, I believe, at an early age. My dad, I think, was like 13 or 12 when they had this hit record, and you know, I think that was when things started for him and my uncles, basically. So, you know, my dad and my uncles, basically, they were just very, very egotistical, narcissistic, obviously, but they were just very evil in general and put me through a lot of hell growing up. I remember when I first went to stay with my dad when I was a young kid, not to live, but one of the first times I went to visit with my dad. I think my mom had just kind of given up on me and needed some time alone, so she, you know, gave in and let my dad take me for however many days. But I just remember the first time I went there, I couldn't look him in the eye, you know, because there was a lot of abuse at my mom's household, and you know, she got beat, and our stuff that was thrown outside, you know, and there was a lot of drugs in the household and fighting and whatnot. So I had a hard time looking people in the eye, especially someone that I didn't really know. And you know, when I went to stay with my dad, I wasn't very comfortable, and you know, I couldn't look him in the eye, and he made me stand in one place until I could look him in the eye. He's like, "You're gonna sit there until you look me in the eye." I remember he was like on his computer, and I was just standing there behind him, and he was, I guess, waiting for me to give up and tell him that, you know, I was ready to look him in the eye or something, but I never did. I stood there for as long as I could. You know, I was like at the point of passing out and falling over, and he would turn around and yell at me, tell me to get up, stand up. And that was just one of, you know, the very early memories that I have with my dad, forcing me to do things, you know. And then that progressed to like just rules in the house. Like I had to have my slippers on at all times. Had to make sure I turned the lights off wherever, you know, whatever room that I had just left from. You know, of course, wash the dishes. Just basic stuff that was good discipline, but it just kind of was turned extreme quite often, and things were blown out of proportion. When I moved with him when I was 8, I was really into football. That was like my passion, my dream, was to one day, you know, be able to buy my mom a house and maybe play in the NFL. So go to college, make something of myself. So that was what I wanted to do, and he signed me up for youth football, and you know, he played in high school as well, but I feel like obviously he was trying to relive it through me. And you know, he coached my first year of youth football league, and after practice every day he would just kind of like keep me awake all night. You know, he'd be telling me like that I didn't apply myself enough, and be going over mistakes that I had made at practice, and just kind of drilling me. And I remember just thinking as a kid, like, when is this guy gonna leave me alone so I could go to sleep? You know, I was exhausted, and you know, just taking things to an extreme. Was constantly having to deal with that. Sorry again, my dog has these hot spots because we just moved to a new location. I got to make sure he's not gonna chew on himself too much because it's only making him worse. But let's see where I left off. Playing ball, my dad coaching. That being not the greatest experience, but continued playing sports. Also played instruments as well, and I remember my dad just snapping on me, trying to teach me things on the guitar, you know, just like he would do many things, whether it was like doing homework, anything that involved teaching. He was just very impatient and would become very volatile and unhinged quite easy. So I realized I had to teach myself how to play guitar, you know, and that's something that I did, just learned by ear, and excelled in that pretty well. I was in a couple bands myself, growing up. And then about junior high is when I started really having trouble in school, paying attention, focusing. I started falling behind heavily, dealing with a lot of depression and stuff like that. My dad didn't want to take any accountability for that, of course, so he tried to convince the school that I had learning disabilities so that I would be placed with some of my friends, some of the other kids that we knew who were excelling in the classes for kids who had learning disabilities. However, I knew I didn't have learning disabilities because I didn't have some of the same issues like they had. I was really good at spelling. I was really good at writing. My writing looked really clean. I wasn't dyslexic. I really don't believe in ADHD or ADD. It's just kind of, you're either interested in a subject or you're not, and it really depends on the teacher, I believe. But he wanted to convince me and everyone else that I had some type of learning disabilities and I belonged in these classes. So he made me go to this place where they did all these tests for me, and I basically just failed all the tests on purpose because I knew how much my dad wanted me to be in these classes, and I had fallen so far behind that I didn't see that it would be possible for me to catch up. I didn't realize how important that would be later on in my life, as far as getting into schools that required you to have taken certain classes. But yeah, one of the many things narcissist parents do, they will take no responsibility and try to blame everything else except for themselves and their own bad parenting. So that was the beginning of my troubles. I don't know if I want to make this a whole life story, but just kind of to sum it up, I went through a lot of hardships in my teenage years. Obviously, a lot of fights and battles and arguments with my dad, a lot of getting attacked, getting beat, getting choked, getting slammed, getting tackled, him blowing up on me for basically anything you could imagine, any type of disagreement, any type of talking back would often lead to me getting attacked. And we lived on our own for a while in a studio apartment, and he ended up moving back into my grandparents' house. My grandpa had passed away by this time, and it was just my grandma, who was kind of like my second mom, really. But my uncles were still living there, and I lived there a little bit. And when we moved back, my uncles were involved in a lot of the attacks on me with my dad. It was always 3-on-1, and they were always trying to get me to fight them or something, for them to be able to say that I hit them or that I did something other than just talk back to them. And it wasn't until the age of going live on, whether it was Facebook or whatever. This was long before YouTube and long before these camera phones were of such good quality. I started recording them, and then they kind of let up on me, but it was still a lot of verbal attacks and whatnot. I got attacked by the 3 of them. They jumped me and they dragged me through my nana's kitchen, choked me out. I remember screaming to my dad, help, I can't breathe, and my dad kicking me in the back of the head, saying, I want to hurt you too, while I was getting choked out on the ground. They took advantage because they knew that I wasn't going to fight back. I was holding onto my phone, filming them when they started punching me and dragging me through my grandma's kitchen and put me in a chokehold. And they got the phone out of my hands, and I just got up, and I was and I could see that they were shocked that I didn't fight back. They were all ready to do something and ready to take an ass whooping, because I definitely could have whooped all 3 of their asses. I was probably 16, 17. And I just wanted my phone back. I was like, just give me my phone, just give me my phone. Actually, by this time, I might have been out of high school. I was probably 19. And he's like, you're going to delete the video? You're going to delete the video? And I was like, yeah, whatever, just give me my phone. And I was going through the phase where you just never called the cops at the time, so I didn't, even though I had the video. I saved as much of it as I could onto an email that I lost access to, so that video is no longer available. But I have other videos of them attacking me, trying to get me to fight them. I've shared those in different platforms and whatnot. Maybe I'll share those here in the future as well. But all this to get us to where I'm trying to you know, start this channel off today is my experience just learning that my dad is and has been a narcissist this whole time. My uncles both passed away. My dad was living by himself in my grandparents' home that he now owns. Obviously, you know, through the family trust and whatnot, he's the last one left. And I went no contact with my dad several times, not knowing that was, you know, the only resolve for dealing with these narcissists. But, you know, I was on my own. I was homeless for a few years and did everything from, you know, washing dishes, roofing demolition, you know, different types of construction, you name it. Asbestos, mold removal, doing horrible things, breathing in horrible chemicals, doing anything I can to try to survive and pay my bills and keep food in my stomach, basically. I was pursuing I was trying to be an artist. You know, I was pursuing a career as an artist in music as well. So, you know, that was a lot of hardships in that. You know, printing out CDs, writing songs, recording. I had a little studio with some friends at one time, but eventually I got into the trades and became an electrician when I was 26 years old. I'm 35 now, so, you know, I've been an electrician for almost 10 years, a few down periods, so I'd say about 6 to 8 years total experience. But in that time I was able to, you know, get myself out of my car, pay off my car that I'd been financing, that kind of kept me living out of it for so long, because no one ever told me about, you know, financing a car and interest and all that. But you know, I was able to get myself a studio apartment on my own, and you know, I lived in that for about 4 or 5 years and met my now wife. And you know, we lived together for a while, and we were about to move to a different location. Basically, I started visiting my dad again. My uncles passed away, and I tried to be there for him as much as I can and try to help out around the house. And you know, that's the thing about narcissists. They'll love bomb you, and they'll make it seem like they care about you and they love you, but, you know, you're really just supply to them. Like I was always trying to do things for my dad and never really felt like he was really respecting me as a man. I have a sister as well, half sister I guess you'd say, who also talks to my dad. My dad has completely infantilized her. He's made her completely dependent on him. He was giving her thousands and thousands of dollars, $1,500 a week for over 3 years, I came to find out. She's not his blood daughter, and you know, she never told me he was a narcissist, but she had gone no contact in the past as well, and my dad you know, lured her back in by basically paying for a relationship with her and infantilizing her. And I think everything she does is basically like a romance scam, where she scams my dad because she knows that he's basically paying. It's like a transactional relationship. And even my dad knows that she would not come around if he wasn't giving her money. But you know, I was back to what I was saying. I was gonna move to a different location with my wife, and you know, I'd done a lot for my dad. I tried to be there for him as much as I can. You know, at this point, I'm a grown man. I apologize and forgave him for everything that he'd done to me in the past, and try to let it go. But he would still blow up on me quite often, and we'd have these weird like arguments. And whether it was like my political opinions or something, things would just totally set him off, and he'd blow up on me, and I wouldn't talk to him for a few days. You know, and then try to like make sense of it. And you know, you only have one dad. The Bible says to honor your parents, but you know, I didn't realize that, you know, you don't honor your parents when they're not honorable, basically. I didn't realize how evil he was, basically, like I said, until just this past year. But you know, we were close to moving up to Lake Tahoe, and my dad was basically trying to convince me that I shouldn't move up there, how dangerous it is driving in the snow and whatnot. And it made me think like, maybe my dad actually does care about me, you know, because it never really seemed like that. With all the choices I'd made through my life, he never really showed any type of concern or care for my own well-being. So once I was about to leave, he was kind of changing his tone, and he offered to let my girlfriend at the time and I live in the back house on my grandparents' property that he owned, because like I said, my dad and my uncles lived there their whole lives, and my uncles had built an apartment and a recording studio in the backyard. It was like a 2-bedroom apartment, and the downstairs unit was supposed to be a garage, but they turned it into a recording studio. These guys lived there their whole lives, never paid rent their entire lives, had this recording studio, continued to play every weekend with their band, and didn't do anything for themselves. They dressed like bums. They didn't really care. It was almost embarrassing. Like, my dad drove like a 1967 or something Econoline van. I think it was a Ford, and it was just so embarrassing. It was this big white, crappy van that he would drop me off at school with. They used it for their gigs and stuff for the past however 30-40 years. And my dad also became a plumber. He didn't have a job his entire life until he was 40 years old. My uncles never got a real job. My dad did, when he turned 40. And I guess that was because he asked my grandma if my mom could move in and could live at the house with them before I was born, around that time when I was about to be born. And my grandma said no. So my dad said, all right, I guess I got to get my own place. So he got a job in construction and became a plumber, and did all right for himself financially, but never really did anything with it. It's not like he didn't have the means to get himself a decent vehicle. Probably honestly could have bought himself properties and whatnot if he really cared about that, if he cared about his future. But that's the thing about these boomers. They completely were given everything from their parents, and they don't want to do anything for their own children. And that's something I came to find out. But so my dad said that we could move in. I was pretty hesitant to at first, but I thought maybe things will work out, and we'll be in a separate property, and maybe I'll be able to actually have a good relationship with my dad, because I hadn't my entire life. It made me wonder if he was even really my dad for so long. I just couldn't believe it. So we moved in, and shortly after we moved in, my dad broke his hip. He was running across the street in the middle of the night in a hurry, doing some projects. He was getting his van worked on by a mechanic, and he parked one vehicle in one location, and took the other vehicle, left the other vehicle with the mechanic, and was running across the street in the middle of the night, fell in the intersection and broke his hip. Called me from the hospital, told me he needed me to move his van that he had parked at some location or something. Anyway, completely broke his hip, and we took care of him through two hip surgeries. Someone's coming in. So yeah, my dad broke his hip, and that was in October, just a couple weeks after we had moved in, and was in the hospital for quite some time. And we did everything we could to be there for him. He, took care of the house and everything. He got out. His hip didn't really recover too well. We did everything we could for him. We cooked him food, bought him groceries, went to the grocery store for him, took him to all his appointments. I tried to spend as much time as I could with him to cheer him up. I would, after work, I would take my dogs to spend time with him, and hopefully lift his spirits up a little bit. And if I wouldn't, if I was too tired and I didn't go, you'd be like, where were you yesterday? I was waiting for you. Like, you didn't come through. You haven't come through in 2 days or whatever. So I felt like he really wanted me to spend time with him and visit with him, and it seemed like a good thing at first. But after he broke his hip while he was in the hospital, I forgot to mention, he told me, he's like, I need you to go pick up the mail and bring it here. It's the trust. I need to finalize it. It's the trust for the house. And I was like, okay, and I'm pretty sure he told me I could look at it, but it was open anyway. So, I came to find out that he had me and my half-sister on this family trust that he was finalizing. And he was putting the house 50-50 ownership, to my sister and I, which, whatever. Well, not really whatever. It's kind of like, so I'm basically going to lose the house, because I don't remember who it was, but I came to learn that even if she owns 1%, even if she gets 1% of the house, she could force me to sell it, and I would have to buy her out. So that was kind of, well, actually, the reason I found out was because I called my sister when my dad was in the hospital. This was before I even found out about the trust. I called my sister and I said, Dad's in the hospital. Now would be a great time to stop asking him for money. Because one of the reasons my dad broke his hip and was in such a hurry and so stressed out is because she'd kept asking him for money, and he was like working himself to death, basically, it seemed. And so I told her now would be a great time to stop asking him for money, because I wasn't really getting along with my sister. I don't really like how she just takes and takes and takes, and who knows if she's on drugs or what. But after I said that, on the phone to her, I was talking to her, she went off on me. She said, "You're gonna sell the house, give me half, and I'm gonna have my money." And I was like, what? Like, Dad's not dead, dude. Like, what are you talking about? Like, he's in the hospital with a broken hip, like, where is this coming from? And she was like, I should have somebody hurt you or whatever, and I'm just like, whatever, so and I have that recording as well. But so I go to the hospital and I tell my dad what she said, and then my dad was like, yeah, I need you to go get this mail. Of course, my dad didn't really seem to care too much that she said that, or like take her seriously, but came to find out that he put us 50-50 on this trust. I guess he'd been talking about it with my sister, and I became aware and made my dad aware that she could force me to sell the house if he has his 50-50 on it. And this is a house that I was raised in with my grandparents, my blood grandparents, who aren't her blood grandparents. She never lived in that house at all. I think she stopped coming to stay there when she was probably not even in her teens yet. And this is the house that I was raised in with my grandparents, and the town that I lived in basically my entire life, where I had all my roots. So that was a big concern for me, and I mentioned to my dad, and my dad didn't believe it at first, and then I showed him some lawyer videos, that yeah, it's true, she can and will force me to sell the house, and she's already telling me, like, I'm gonna sell the house and she's gonna have her money. So that created this big rift in between my dad and I. And first he said he was going to change it, he was gonna fix it, and make it maybe like 25% her, me, so I wouldn't have to take out millions of dollar loans just to try to save my grandparents' house. And my dad, as he started to heal, he started becoming went back to his old abusive ways and becoming a little more hostile towards me. And one day we got in an argument, and a lot of it was about the trust, because I had some questions about it and my dad didn't have any answers. And he's like, well, like, talk to the lawyer about it. And I'm not gonna go talk to the lawyer about it myself. It's like, I thought maybe my dad and I could both go and talk to the lawyer to get some information, and learn what's gonna happen, and I kind of want to know what could happen with my future, right? My dad's 75, 76 years old, so I didn't mean anything ill by that. I just thought it was the right thing to do, because I didn't want to talk to the lawyer myself. So I made an appointment with my lawyer, and my dad, the next day, my dad's like, you made an appointment with the lawyer? And I was like, yeah, like, we're both gonna talk to him, And then he blew up on me about it, like as if I was doing it behind his back or with some type of malicious intent. And that created this huge, like, he blew up on me in the house and started telling me, you're gonna buy her out, basically telling me, like, you're gonna have to take out loans, start saving your money, and buy her out like everyone else, he said. And I was like, well, how much did you pay for the house, And of course that really set him off. So, I go upstairs after he blew up on me, and there was a Ring camera in the living room, and I'd never listened in to anything that he ever said before, and that was never my intent. But my fiance's like, there was another guest staying in the house. It was one of supposedly our cousins, but I don't think he is really a cousin. I think he's just another guy that my dad has a transactional relationship with, where he does work for him in exchange for my dad doing plumbing work for him. But this guy needed a place to stay for a while, so my dad was letting him stay in our house, in the downstairs house. And my wife was like, yeah, your dad's down there talking to Tommy, and like, listen to what he's saying about you, So my dad was like basically talking all this crazy shit about me, and so was this other guy who really doesn't know anything about me or my family really. My dad was letting him call me greedy and say all this stuff, and a lot of it was about the house. And the guy was like, what has Matt done to deserve this house? And it's like, what? Like, and then he's like, Matt's greedy, doesn't pay his rent. And it's like, dude, I've offered to pay my dad rent several times, I've paid for a lot of things on this, a lot of upgrades to the house, and obviously when I moved in, needed a lot of things, so I'd pay for all that myself. I never asked my dad for anything. My sister's the one that my dad basically infantilizes and gives hundreds and thousands of dollars to, and I've never asked him for anything. So I was shocked that my dad was saying all these things and letting this guy say all this stuff. And so I went down there, and I sat down and I was like, well, let's have this conversation together. Like, you want in on this conversation, Tommy? Let's talk about it. I was like, you don't know anything about me. And then my dad jumped up, of course, and told me to get out of here, saying he was going to call the cops, the whole thing, whatever. And mind you, they still haven't realized that the Ring camera was there. You know what I mean? So, I leave, and then I'm still listening to him talk all this shit about me. And the next day, like, it was heart-wrenching, really, like, listening to my dad talk about me, saying these things that I kind of already knew, like how hateful and jealous he was towards me. And it was really devastating. So that the next day he was like talking to my sister on the phone and saying all this other crazy stuff about me and my fiance. She was my fiance at the time, and she was pregnant, with our first baby on the way, which is another reason I was kind of concerned about what was going to happen with the house and with my future, because I'm about to become a dad myself, and I really did want to raise my family there. And my dad had this thing in his mind that I was going to move away to wherever my wife wanted me to move, and I was going to sell the house, but we never intended to. We really did want to stay there, and I really did want to have him be able to see his grandkids grow there, and to be able to do the things that I did and play the sports that I played at the places I played them, and go to the same school I went to, and be a part of my history and my legacy in that city. But things just kept turning for the worst. I went down there a couple days later, and I told my dad, because it was heart-wrenching, but it was actually comical at the same time, because I threw things at my dad when I went down there. Not threw things at him, but I went down there, and when I interrupted the conversation with Tommy, I was like saying all this stuff. I was pointing out what they had said about me. I said, you think I'm greedy, dude? Like, you think I don't pay my rent? Like, I've never tried to pay my rent. Like I haven't offered to pay rent. Basically, they were shocked that I knew basically the whole conversation. So my dad thought that I had the house bugged, but he knew that there was a Ring camera in the house. He just forgot or whatever, I guess. Or he didn't realize that, in this 2025, you can listen to conversations. You can communicate through the Ring camera. I'd communicated with him through that same Ring camera, but I guess he, for whatever reason, just didn't realize it. But so it was comical listening to them, like, looking for things in the house and thinking that I had bugged the place. So I told my dad, I went down there, I took the camera out, and I told him, I was like, I didn't bug the house. It's the Ring camera that's always been there that you knew was there, And of course, he just got upset, and then he took down every other Ring camera that I had around the house, and that was that. And I wrote my dad a long letter, and I gave it to him, basically like letting him know that we were going to be leaving. And I don't know what I did for him to hate me so much, and all that stuff. Basically mentioned my uncles and everything, and told him thank you for everything, and I'm sorry, basically, whatever. Nothing more I could have done. So I gave him this letter, and about 4 or 5 days later, my dogs were downstairs where he was down there. And I had been no contact basically since I gave him this letter, a little less than a week. And we've asked him many times, please don't give our dogs any treats, for 2 reasons. One is my dog has a very sensitive stomach, and 2 is because sometimes they'll fight over the treats. So my dad gave the dogs a treat, and actually, it's funny because I asked him if we can keep, I was like, I know you took all the Ring cameras away, but could we just put this one Ring camera back up, because it's watching over my bikes, like some of my valuables, and I just wanted to make sure that they didn't get stolen. And I don't know if he just like was trying to get like some kind of sympathy points or something, or get me to forgive him or something. I don't know. But he's like, yeah, you can put it there. So I put the Ring camera back up, and so I go down there, and he had given the dogs a treat, and I guess the dogs fought over the treat because my dog was bleeding from his mouth, like he'd been bit, like they'd went at it, and I heard it, and I went down there and I saw that. So I just asked my dad. I tried asking him real nicely, I says, can you please not give the dogs any treats? And he just totally snapped on me. He's like, what are you gonna do about it? What if I did give him a treat? Like, don't give me any shit. Give your kid shit. Give your kid shit. Meaning like he's speaking about my unborn child. Like, this is what he's saying about my unborn child, and this is what he thinks of him. Give your kid shit. Give your kid shit. And then starts like telling me to get out of there, and putting his hands on me, trying to push me out the door. And then my fiance hears it and comes downstairs, and was just like, your son just trying to talk to you, or like can't even talk to your son, or said something. And then he starts going off on my fiance, and saying all this stuff. You can't do it on your own, and just being ridiculous. So yeah, we decided that it's time for us to leave. So we didn't know where we were gonna go. My family, my fiance, my wife's family is from, fiance at the time, my wife now, her family's from the Northeast, and I know working construction would be kind of crazy in the snow. So we just wanted to move somewhere that's a little more similar weather to where I grew up, and that's where we ended up coming. We moved all the way across the country. Man, sorry, part 4 or whatever. I'm determined to finish this video today, but it's a short summary. We decided to move across the country. We picked a location. We don't know anybody here. We'd never been here before. We'd never visited. We just knew we needed to get out of there as soon as possible. So, I wrote him that letter. I let him know, and then he blew up on me. That day, he actually got arrested. The day that he attacked me, it was on Ring camera. Like I said, I'd put that Ring camera back up. He'd given me permission to, and it ended up, being one of the main pivotal, like, moments in this whole thing was that attack that was on ring camera. He got arrested this time. Instead of threatening to call the cops on me like he always did and have me arrested, this time he was arrested, and it was clearly assault. He went to jail for one night, and then he got out early the next, I don't know what time he got out, but he was out the next day. And he put up signs, no trespassing signs, you will be arrested, leave me in peace, handwritten signs he put on all the doors of the back house. And I let him know in the letter that we were going to stay, because we were getting married. We had our wedding coming up, and I had already paid for like half of the wedding, and just had so much invested in it, and we didn't want to let this like ruin our wedding, like narcissists love to do. Any opportunity they have, they will ruin your important days and just try to bring you down. I had heard him on some of the conversations he was having say that he didn't want to be at the wedding anyway, and he didn't believe in the wedding. He didn't believe in spending that much money on the wedding. Basically just completely shitting on my relationship with my wife, shitting on the wedding. So I'd put in the letter that I was sad that he wasn't going to be there, and he wasn't going to meet his grandson. And of course, he just made something else out of that. But we stayed for the wedding. The wedding was beautiful. He wasn't there. It was like one of the best days of my life, basically. And I'm just so glad that he wasn't a part of it. Maybe I'll do a video about just that later on in the future, about how we had to have our wedding and how you could never have your narcissist parents at your wedding, and the best thing you could do is uninvite him to the wedding. I'd given him a wedding invitation, and he was shitting on the wedding invitation, saying that our love wasn't even real, and basically saying he was just going to come to the wedding and leave, just pay his respects like a funeral, that he had gone to. So after the wedding, about a week or two later, we packed up all our things, and we had this apartment across the country that we had a move-in date for, and we drove across the country in about like 5 or 6 days, and we made it coast to coast, west coast to east coast, and that's where we're living now. And it really is the best decision that I ever made. As heartbreaking as this whole thing has been, looking for answers to some of the things that I was going through, I stumbled upon like narcissist parent videos, and it described my dad perfectly. And I just tried so many times to work things out with my dad and to be a good son and to honor him. And who knows how much longer I would have continued to do that if I hadn't heard what I heard through the ring camera, and if he hadn't attacked me like he did. He continued to just outdo himself with zero accountability. After this whole thing unfolded, he after he got out of jail for attacking me, he went and tried to put a restraining order on me, and continued to try to follow through with that. He I had my phone connected to the internet that was under his name. He caused me to basically lose my phone number because he took me off of the account, and I couldn't get in without a verification code, which he refused to give me. So I lost a lot of contacts, but that's fine. It's like, these are some of the things you just have to give up to gain much more in the future. Like, letting go of every type of tie is the best thing that you could possibly do. I've heard some petty people on here try to go back and talk to their parents to get passwords and certain type of things, and it's just ridiculous. Nothing is worth your peace of mind. The best thing you could possibly do for your life, for your future, for your kids' future, is to get as far away from these people as possible. Break any type of ties you have to them, financial, whatever it may be, history, who knows. but nothing is worth it. It's detrimental to your health. Like, both of my uncles and my grandpa, they died of cancer, and it's probably from being around my dad, who's a narcissist. And I was sick quite a bit growing up, and to the point where I thought my dad was like physically poisoning me and poisoning the food that he made when we lived out on our own for that short amount of time when I wasn't living at my grandparents' home. And I wouldn't doubt it that he was, but what was worse is the poison that I was, being subject to just dealing with this person, the amount of hatred that he had towards me was amazing. Racial hatred. He just hated me because I was white. He hated white people in general. When I was a kid, he would say pretty people get everything given to him, like pretty people like the Haneys, like referring to my mom's side of the family who's white because my dad is Hispanic. My grandma had some of the same type of racial hatred as well. My grandpa, not so much. He was a World War II veteran. He really genuinely loved America and was grateful for all the opportunity he'd been given and all that he was able to make of himself in this country. Then he had a lot of white friends himself. He played a lot of country music. He played guitar as well. And that's something that I'm grateful for, was the lessons that I learned from my grandparents. I feel like I learned way more from my grandparents about life and about being a man than I did from my narcissist father and my uncles who hated me, basically, and who put nothing above themselves and their band. They have a documentary on YouTube called Making It, which is pretty hilarious, and the name of their band is the Brian Faith Band, which is hilarious in itself because these are three demons who held on to this local fame that they had, and tried their whole lives to make another hit and go on another tour. It's what the whole documentary is about. It's about three boomers who had their whole life in easy mode, everything given to them that you could possibly ask for. Never had to struggle, never had to work, never had to pay rent a day in their lives. I know I said my dad became a plumber, but he didn't have to. He literally could have stayed at home and he did. He only lived with my mom for a short amount of time before they split. He ended up beating her while she was pregnant with me and going to jail for it, and that was when they split, and that's why she wanted nothing to do with him. I missed a lot of things in this this video describing my past because there's just so many things come to mind, so many things that I tried to forget, really, and that's just something that is a part of like being like having these type of parents. You're always in fight or flight mode. Your memory is completely warped because you have so much trauma, for lack of a better term, just things that you try to block out from your mind and that you want to let go of. My dad would constantly be reminding me of things that I did or didn't even do as a kid. He was harping on something like that never even happened, saying that like Matt shoved a hamburger in my face, something that I'm like, what? Like that never happened. Like I heard him talking about it on the Ring camera when he was 10 or something. Like it's like he didn't say age, but he must have been referring to something I did as a child. It's like, if that really happened, what did you do after? Complete fabrications, character assassination attempts. It's really unbelievable. But my heart goes out to anybody having to deal with these type of parents. It really is devastating, and the sooner you find out, the sooner you learn about this, the better, because then you can go no contact, and it's really the only thing you can do, and break away and get away as far away from you can from these people. Break every single tie, because that's really the only thing that you can do, and then begin working on yourself. Because even before I knew my dad was a narcissist, I was doing my own thing, and that was some of the best times that I had in my life, and when I was able to heal and let go a lot of this pain and suffering. And then I made the mistake of, I had to learn the lesson, I guess I should say, of going back and trying to have a real relationship with my dad, thinking that he could change and that it could be for the better that I go back and live with him, with my now wife. But came to find that it's a blessing, and it's devastating at the same time that I learned all this stuff about him, and why I should not have any contact with him. It truly is devastating, but a blessing at the same time. It's tough sometimes. I find myself like watching the videos of him attacking me and listening to the audios of him like saying all this crazy stuff about me on the Ring camera, and I kind of go back into the funk mode of the pain and how painful it was. But I've learned to let go, and it really does feel good knowing that I'm free from all that. I do have support from some of my family members. His younger sister, my aunt, dealt with with him a lot, has a lot of trauma from him as well. They no longer speak, and she's been great. She's been there for me so much, and I'm so grateful for her as well. Was heavily in the church like my grandparents, still is. She's an amazing woman. She sings worship. That's something that has really got me through this as well. It's just having faith in God and trusting him. I don't consider myself like holier or religious very much. I don't go to church. I just keep God in my heart at all times, and I pray quite often and give thanks quite often, and that's really something that's helped me. I feel like could help anyone going through this type of situation, because the more you try to make sense of these people, the more mind-boggling it is, because nothing they do really makes sense. Not to get too like spiritual or preachy, but I do believe that these narcissists are possessed by a demonic spirit, something within them. They're just like a vessel for this negative demonic energy that they feed off of other people's energy, and they try to attack anybody with love and joy in their hearts, and they try to destroy people. My grandma used to tell me the devil wants to kill, steal, and destroy, and that's what my narcissist father has done. I do believe he's basically killed my grandpa and my uncles from his narcissistic ways, just his narcissist personality disorder, whatever you want to call it. And I wouldn't say that I hate my dad. It's very frustrating, and it takes a lot, but I really do pray for him, and I wish him the best. I wish him all the healing. I don't think it's possible that they'll ever change, and we know that a lot of the tactics of these narcissists are to try to lure you back in, but I don't think I ever will speak to him again. Have no reason to. I don't know what's going to happen with the house. I'm pretty sure that he's given it to my half-sister, and she's been like I said, romance scamming him and using her children to manipulate him and do the same thing. But I think he sees through her. He told me he did. He knew that she was only there for money, but I don't know if she has something on him. Some of the other channels and groups that I've spoken to about this believe that my dad is paying for my sister's silence for something, that she has something on him, but who knows. But I'm looking forward to my own future and letting go of all this stuff from the past. I'm a dad now. I had my own child, and like I feel like that's some of these topics alone I could make a whole video about, because it's amazing, when you have a kid and are going through all this stuff. I just know that I'll always have my kids back, and I'll always love them, and could never imagine doing any of the things to my seed that my dad did to me. And it's something about the boomer generation, I feel like, too, that had everything given to him, because my grandpa was a great man. He did everything he could for his kids. I don't blame him so much as I blame society. I do believe that the whole sex, drugs, rock and roll, you can add mind control to that, because the whole like MK Ultra thing, the CIA's involvement with a lot of the hippie movement and whatnot, and just the fact that the boomers believe so much of what they see on TV and in the mainstream news. That was a lot of the arguments we'd have was just like disagreements about politics and how he just believed whatever the news was telling him, basically. And anytime I would try to share my opinion, he would get very defensive. He didn't like acknowledging anything that I ever told him that could benefit him, to where he would often, I would like tell him something that would be trying to look out for him in his best interest. He would, brush it off, ignore it, and then later he would like tell my sister or somebody, oh yeah, I saw this video on YouTube that says, this is good for you. And it's like, I told you that like 3 weeks ago, dude. But whatever. I'm gonna end this video here. There's another dog coming, and I brought my dog back over here without a leash because I wanted to finish this video. I wanted to wrap this up. I'm gonna continue to make more videos. This is just a short story. I'm gonna be more specific with the topics that I'm gonna touch on, and I really hope you guys can benefit from this content. May God bless each and every one of you, and may you continue to heal on this journey. And until next time, please do like, subscribe, help me grow this channel. And if you want to see me do more videos, I appreciate you. Much love. Peace.